The Discovery, the research vessel Prometheus Dawn, drifted silently through the debris field that had once been the Kepler 442 system. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the observation deck's cold metal as she watched chunks of what used to be planets tumble slowly past the ship's hull. The destruction here was ancient, but something about the precision of it made her skin crawl. Captain Marcus Reed joined her at the window, his weathered face reflecting the dim light of the distant red dwarf star. He had seen many dead systems in his 30 years of deep space exploration, but this one felt different. The planets hadn't just died naturally or been destroyed by war. They had been consumed, leaving behind only perfectly spherical chunks of matter, as if something had taken systematic bites out of entire worlds. Aria. The ship's AI materialized as a soft blue hologram beside them. Her voice carried a note of curiosity that Alina had learned to recognize after 5 years of working together. The AI announced that long-range sensors had detected something unusual on the third planet's largest remaining fragment. The readings suggested artificial structures that had somehow survived whatever had destroyed this system. Alina felt her pulse quicken. As the lead xenarchaeologist for the Human Exploration Consortium, she had spent her career searching for evidence of extinct alien civilizations. Most systems this old contained nothing but cosmic dust and radiation. Finding intact structures was like discovering treasure in a graveyard. The shuttle ride to the surface took 3 hours, during which Alina reviewed everything they knew about the Kepler 442 system. According to stellar dating, the destruction here had occurred roughly 50,000 years ago, long before humanity had developed spaceflight or even agriculture. Whatever had happened here had taken place when humans were still learning to control fire. The structures they found defied explanation. Massive crystalline towers jutted from the asteroid's surface, their surfaces covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The architecture was unlike anything in the galactic databases, with flowing curves that suggested the builders had grown their cities rather than constructing them. Elena's team deployed their scanning equipment, while Captain Reed established a secure perimeter. The energy readings were off the charts, indicating that whatever power source these structures used was still active after 50 millennia. Aria began the delicate process of attempting to interface with the alien systems. The breakthrough came when Alina noticed that the shifting symbols weren't random. They followed patterns that reminded her of the mathematical sequences humans used in their own computer systems. She suggested that Aria try using prime number sequences as a communication protocol, a technique that had worked with other alien technologies in the past. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The crystalline towers began to glow with increasing intensity while streams of data flooded Aria's processing systems. The AI worked frantically to translate the incoming information, her holographic form flickering as she diverted processing power to handle the massive data transfer. What they discovered in those first few hours changed everything. Alina thought she knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The structures were an archive, a final record left by a species called the Thraxi. According to the translated files, the Thraxi had been the dominant civilization in this region of space, controlling hundreds of star systems and countless worlds. The archive spoke of a golden age that had lasted for thousands of years, during which the Thraxi had believed themselves to be alone in the universe. They had built magnificent cities, composed beautiful art, and developed technology that seemed like magic even by current human standards. Their society had been peaceful, focused on knowledge and exploration rather than conquest. But the Golden Age had ended with the arrival of something the Thraxi called the devour. The archive files described entities that existed partially outside normal space-time, creatures that fed on the life force of entire civilizations. They would appear without warning, consuming everything in their path before vanishing back into whatever dimension they came from. Alina felt sick as she read the detailed accounts of entire worlds being stripped of life in a matter of days. The Devourers didn't just kill their victims, they absorbed their life energy, their memories, their very essence. Billions of Thraxi had simply ceased to exist, leaving behind only empty husks that crumbled to dust within hours. The most disturbing part of the records was how systematic the destruction had been. The Devourers hadn't attacked randomly, but had followed patterns that suggested intelligence and purpose. They had targeted the most populous worlds first, then moved on to industrial centers and research facilities. It was as if they had been following a plan designed to completely erase the Thraxi from existence. But something had stopped them. According to the final entries in the archive, the Devourers had suddenly retreated just as they were preparing to consume the last remaining Thraxi worlds. The records spoke of mysterious allies who had appeared from across the galaxy, beings who fought with a ferocity and creativity that the Devourers couldn't understand or counter. Elena's hands shook as she read the descriptions of these mysterious saviors. The Thraxi had called them the Flame Bearers, creatures who used fire and metal in ways that defied conventional physics. They fought not just with advanced weapons, but with improvised tools and tactics that seemed to materialize from nowhere. Most importantly, they had shown something the galaxy had never seen before: the ability to unite dozens of different species under a single banner. The alliance that formed around these flame bearers had been unlike anything in galactic history. Species that had been enemies for millennia suddenly worked together, sharing technology and resources in ways that should have been impossible. The Devourers, accustomed to facing divided civilizations that fell one by one, found themselves confronting a united front that grew stronger with each battle. Arya's voice interrupted Elena's reading with an urgent announcement. Deep within the archive, she had discovered something that made her processing cores run cold. The final Thraxi. Records contained detailed descriptions of the flame bearers, including biological scans and behavioral analyses. The data was incomplete, but enough remained to make a positive identification. The flame bearers were human, not creatures that looked like humans or shared some characteristics with humanity, but actual human beings from Earth. The genetic markers were unmistakable. Even though the records predated human spaceflight by 50,000 years, Captain Reed stared at the data in disbelief. He pointed out that the timeline made no sense, asking how humans could have been fighting in space wars before they had even invented the wheel. Alina admitted she had no explanation, but the evidence was clear. Somehow, humans had been involved in galactic affairs long before they should have been capable of leaving their home planet. The mystery deepened when Arya discovered sealed chambers deep within the largest crystal tower. The environmental readings showed that the chambers were still pressurized and maintained at temperatures suitable for carbon-based life. More importantly, the chambers contained stasis pods that were still active. Elena's team spent hours carefully opening the first pod, following protocols designed to prevent contamination or injury to whatever might be inside. What they found was a Thraxi, perfectly preserved and still alive after 50 millennia in suspended animation. The alien was tall and graceful, with crystalline skin that reflected light in rainbow patterns. Most remarkably, it was conscious and aware within moments of revival. The Thraxi introduced himself as Keeper Zelthan, one of the last archivists of his people. He had volunteered to remain in stasis until the day when the flame-bearers returned, maintaining the records and waiting for the moment when his knowledge would be needed again. His first words, translated through Aria's systems, were a question that made Elena's blood run cold. "Keeper." Zelthan asked if the humans had come because the Devourers were returning. He explained that the ancient enemy had not been destroyed, only driven back to their extra-dimensional realm. The Alliance had managed to seal the rifts between dimensions, but the seals were not permanent. Every 50,000 years, the barriers weakened, and the Devourers would attempt to break through again. The timing was not coincidental. According to the Thraxi archives, the cycle was about to complete itself. Within days or weeks, the dimensional barriers would weaken enough for the Devourers to begin their return. The only hope was to gather the old Alliance, to bring together the species that had fought side by side 50 millennia ago. But most of those species had either gone extinct or forgotten their role in the ancient war. Only the humans remained, and even they had lost all memory of their involvement in galactic affairs. Keeper Zelthan looked at Alina with eyes that held 50,000 years of patience and hope, asking if her people were ready to take up the flame once again. Before Alina could respond, every alarm on the Prometheus Dawn began shrieking at once. Captain Reed's unit crackled with urgent reports from the ship's sensors. Something was tearing holes in space-time itself, creating rifts that led to places that shouldn't exist. The energy readings were identical to the signatures described in the Thraxi archives. The Devourers were coming back, and humanity once again stood as the galaxy's only hope. The legacy unfolds. Emergency protocols activated across human space as news of the dimensional rifts spread from ship to ship. Within hours of Elena's discovery, every major government and military organization in the human exploration consortium had received detailed briefings about the Thraxi archives and the return of the Devourers. What had started as a routine archaeological mission had become the most important discovery in human history. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded the hastily assembled task force from the bridge of the battlecruiser Defiant Justice. She studied the tactical displays showing rift formations across a dozen star systems, each one growing larger and more stable by the hour. The mathematics were clear and terrifying. If the rifts continued to expand at their current rate, the first Devourer scouts would emerge within 72 hours. Keeper Zelthan had been transported to the flagship, where teams of linguists and xenobiologists worked around the clock to extract every detail from his vast memory. The Thraxi archivist carried within his crystalline brain the complete history of the last war, including detailed records of human tactics and capabilities. What he revealed changed everything the consortium thought it knew about their own species. According to Zelthan's accounts, the humans of 50,000 years ago had not just been participants in the Galactic Alliance. They had been its heart and soul, the species around which all others had rallied. Their unique combination of creativity, adaptability, and stubborn refusal to surrender had inspired civilizations across the galaxy to set aside ancient hatreds and work together. The Thraxi records spoke of human commanders who could see solutions where others saw only problems. They described human engineers who could turn any available materials into weapons or tools, and human diplomats who could convince natural enemies to fight side by side. Most importantly, they told of a species that viewed cooperation not as weakness, but as the ultimate expression of strength. Alina found herself appointed as the chief liaison between humanity and the awakening galactic community. As word of the Devourer threat spread through the old communication networks, species that had remained hidden for millennia began to emerge from the shadows. Many had been waiting for this moment, passing down stories and traditions that spoke of the day when the flame-bearers would call them to war once again. The first to answer the call were the Vorthok, a militant insectoid species that controlled a vast network of fortress worlds along the galaxy's outer rim. Their queen mother transmitted a message that brought tears to Elena's eyes. The Vorthok remembered the debt they owed to humanity, and they would honor the ancient alliance regardless of the cost. Next came the ethereal collective, gaseous beings who existed in the upper atmospheres of gas-giant planets. Their vast intellects had spent 50,000 years preparing for this moment, developing new technologies and strategies based on the principles they had learned from human tacticians in the ancient war. They offered their knowledge freely, asking only for the honor of fighting alongside the flame-bearers once more. The crystalline hegemony emerged from the hearts of neutron stars, where they had spent millennia forging weapons capable of harming extra-dimensional entities. The Silicon Brotherhood rose from the asteroid belts, bringing with them mining equipment that could be turned into instruments of war. Even the peaceful Botanical Confederacy, plant-based beings who abhorred violence, offered their services as healers and support specialists. Captain Reed found himself promoted to Commodore and placed in command of a mixed-species fleet unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Ships designed by a dozen different civilizations worked together under human coordination, their crews learning to communicate and cooperate despite vast differences in biology and culture. The integration should have been impossible, but somehow it worked. The key was the human approach to leadership. Instead of demanding obedience, human commanders listened to their alien subordinates and incorporated their suggestions into operational plans. They treated each species as equal partners rather than subordinates, creating an atmosphere of mutual respect that allowed natural talents to flourish. Alina worked closely with Keeper Zelthan to decode the ancient battle strategies stored in the Thraxi archives. What she discovered amazed her. The humans of 50,000 years ago had not relied on superior technology or overwhelming firepower to defeat the divine. Instead, they had used creativity and unpredictability, constantly adapting their tactics to confuse and outmaneuver an enemy that existed partially outside normal space-time. The most effective strategy had been something the records called reality anchoring. By using a combination of quantum entanglement fields and localized gravity generators, human engineers had found a way to force extra-dimensional entities into normal space, where they could be engaged by conventional weapons. The technique required precise timing and perfect coordination between multiple ship types, but it had proven devastatingly effective. Arya worked with the ethereal collective's greatest minds to recreate the reality anchoring technology using modern equipment. The theoretical framework was sound, but implementing it required a level of intuitive understanding that only humans seemed to possess. The aliens could follow the mathematical formulas, but they couldn't make the creative leaps necessary to adapt the technology to changing battlefield conditions. The first test came sooner than anyone had hoped. A dimensional rift near the Centauri system suddenly expanded, disgorging a scout force of devourers into normal space. The creatures were as terrifying as the ancient records had described, resembling massive jellyfish made of living shadow. They moved through space without regard for physics, phasing in and out of visibility as they consumed the life energy of a nearby mining colony. Commodore Reed led the response force, commanding a mixed fleet of human, Vorthok, and crystalline hegemony vessels. The aliens looked to the humans for guidance, trusting in the reputation their species had earned 50,000 years ago. Alina watched from the flagship's bridge as Reed calmly issued orders that seemed to make no tactical sense, but somehow resulted in perfect coordination between wildly different ship designs. The battle that followed proved that the old alliance had lost none of its power. Human creativity combined with alien technology to create weapons and tactics that the Devourers couldn't predict or counter. The reality anchoring systems worked perfectly, trapping the extra-dimensional predators in normal space where concentrated firepower could destroy them. But the victory came with a price. The dying Devourers transmitted a signal back through their dimensional rift, alerting their masters to the return of their ancient enemies. Across the galaxy, rifts began opening at an accelerated rate as the full Devourer fleet prepared to emerge. Admiral Chen received reports from every corner of human space as the invasion began in earnest. Entire star systems went dark as Devourer swarms overwhelmed their defenses. The enemy had learned from their ancient defeat and adapted their tactics accordingly. They struck multiple targets simultaneously, trying to prevent the formation of coordinated resistance, but humanity had also learned from the past. Emergency beacon networks activated across the galaxy, sending rally signals to every species that remembered the old alliance. Within hours, fleets were converging on predetermined rally points, ready to face the cosmic threat that had nearly destroyed galactic civilization 50,000 years ago. Alina stood on the bridge of the new flagship, a massive vessel constructed using combined technologies from a dozen species but commanded by human officers. Around her, the greatest fleet in galactic history prepared for the final battle against the millions of ships from hundreds of different worlds, all united under the banner that had once saved the galaxy. The Devourers emerged from their dimensional rifts in force, bringing with them weapons and creatures that defied description. But they faced an enemy that had grown stronger during their absence. The alliance of 50,000 years ago had been born from desperation and held together by hope. This new alliance was forged from friendship and strengthened by shared purpose. Keeper Zalthan activated the ancient communication networks, sending a message across the galaxy in the voice of every species that had ever stood against the darkness. The words were simple but powerful, a declaration that echoed through space and time. The flame bearers have returned. The galaxy stands united. The Devourers shall not pass. The final battle raged across multiple star systems as the two greatest forces in galactic history clashed once more. But this time, the outcome was never in doubt. Humanity had spent 50,000 years learning to inspire others to bring out the best in every species they encountered. The Devourers found themselves facing not just advanced technology, but something far more dangerous, a united galaxy that refused to surrender. When the last Devourer fell and the dimensional rifts sealed themselves permanently, the galaxy celebrated as one. But for Alina and her fellow humans, the victory was bittersweet. They had discovered a legacy they never knew existed, learned that their species had been heroes long before they reached for the stars. As the fleets dispersed and the various species returned to their homes, they carried with them a new understanding of what humanity represented. The name human became more than just a species designation. It became a symbol of hope, a promise that no matter how dark the future might seem, there would always be someone willing to stand against the darkness. In the years that followed, the galaxy would face new challenges and threats, but it would face them together, united by the example of a species that had shown the universe what it meant to be truly human. The flame bearers had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers, showing every civilization in the galaxy that their differences were not weaknesses to be overcome, but strengths to be celebrated. And across the vast expanse of space, whenever young beings of any species asked about the legends of the ancient alliance, they would be told the story of humanity. They would learn that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act despite it. They would discover that true strength came not from power over others, but from the ability to inspire others to be their best. The name human had indeed become a warning that echoed across the stars, but it was not a warning to fear humanity's wrath. It was a warning to all who would threaten the innocent, all who would prey upon the weak, all who would seek to divide what should be united. It was a warning that somewhere in the galaxy the flame bearers were watching, ready to light the darkness and show the way home. Asterisk.